I know the word scandal is overused, but it surely is a scandal that amidst everything that the battler in Struggle Street has to endure, think interest rates increasing 10 times since last May. Remember what I've said about that? I believe that fixed assets should have a fixed interest rate applied to them. The house is a fixed asset, so that mortgagees wouldn't have to wait on the first Tuesday of every month for dispiriting news that interest rates were going to go up, and more money would have to be found to keep the banks at bay when the wage stays the same. But that must be beyond the capacity of charmers and others to understand. But on top of that, energy prices dramatically affecting every branch of Australian economic life, such that manufacturers are moving offshore. Families don't have that luxury, so the electricity bill goes up for families and for business. Why? And we've referred to that earlier with Mark Latham. Why? Well, we apparently have this scourge called carbon dioxide. As you know, it's the source of all plant life. I repeat for the millionth time, carbon dioxide is 0.04% of the atmosphere, 0.04%. I say this in my sleep. I'm not prepared to be one of the mugs who falls into line believing this is affecting the planet. Follow Greta Thunberg if you like, but count me out of being a disciple of a poorly educated schoolgirl with problems of her own. 0.04%. And of that, only 3% worldwide is man-made. And little old Australia is responsible for 1.3% of 3% of 0.04%. I'm sorry, you'd have to have rocks in your head to believe that the carbon dioxide is the problem. But instead of taking advantage of our massive energy resources, we export our coal to other countries so they can have cheap energy because we're going to stop climate change. Believe that, and you must believe there are tooth fairies at the bottom of the garden. China couldn't care less. Let me tell you this. Last year, China approved the construction of another 106 gigawatts of coal-fired power capacity, the equivalent of 2 large coal-fired power plants per week. Its highest in 7 years. Now, forget the business about the equivalent of 2 large coal power plants a week. 106 gigawatts approved construction has to be weighed against Australia's total consumption of coal-fired power in a year. 25 gigawatts. 25. China are constructing, over and above what they have, another 106 gigawatts. And many of these projects have their approval permits fast-tracked to be constructed in a matter of months. And they are coal-fired. Where does the coal come from? Well, China did have sanctions on Australian exports, but last month, 1 month, we sent 72,000 tonnes of coal to China. After China's zero COVID policy, they're trying to kickstart the economy. How did China do that? With cheap, reliable and available energy. Our coal provides it for China. We have people in Canberra, Bowen and Co, who are acting out the opposite. As one of the finest meteorologists in the world, Professor Richard Lindzen has argued, and remember Perrottet stood up there on Sunday saying, think of your kids. It's just rhetoric. Professor Lindzen has said about all of this nonsense of demonising coal and believing solar panels and wind turbines will do the job when countries like China are just laughing at us. Professor Lindzen said, quote, what we will be leaving our grandchildren, think of our kids, Mr. Perrottet, what we'll be leaving our grandchildren is not a planet damaged by industrial progress, but a record of unfathomable silliness, as well as a landscape degraded by rusting wind farms and decaying solar panels, unquote. In his book, Apocalypse Never, Why Environmental Alarmism Hurts Us All, I've referred this book to you before, Michael Schellenberger, a world-renowned environmental activist now for 20 years, he once went along with all this stuff. But now in the book, he admits he's seen the stupidity of it. And in his book, he apologises to the world for, quote, the climate scare we have created over the past 30 years. He wrote, it's not even our most serious environmental problem. Once you realise how badly misinformed we've been, it's hard not to feel duped, unquote. What Australia needs is a fair dinkum Liberal Party, a fair dinkum coalition that'll argue the truth and dismantle the rubbish that we're being fed by people like Chris Bowen and Matt Keane. As Schellenberger says, quote, Once you realise how badly misinformed we've been, it's hard not to feel duped.